Hi creative friends, this is Soraya and thank you so much for being here. So this is the completed still life and I'm really loving so much of what is going on here. But what I want to talk about in this video are the lessons that I shared in my past 6 videos on still lifes and also my 100-day project, because some of these lessons, actually most of them, apply to anything you paint. So whether it's a still life, whether it's a landscape, whether it's a portrait, these lessons can be applied to anything. So the very first thing I'm going to talk about is the push and pull. And I'm not repeating these adages or lessons just to be repeating them. I'm repeating them because that's the way a lot of us learn, is by repetition and by doing. So when you listen to something again and again and again, it really kind of downloads into you. And then when you repeat it and then do it, it really kind of becomes a part of your painting process. So the push and pull is when you want to push something into the background, whether it's a tree, whether it's, this jar over here, whatever it might be, then what you want to do is, one of the tools that we have is that we can use neutrals or cooler colors and a darker value. That is going to push something into the background. And then when you want to pull something forward in your painting, you generally tend to use lighter values and brighter colors. So think if you're going to be painting a landscape and you want to paint a flower that's in the foreground and a tree in the background. Well, the tree is going to be a darker value and the flower is going to be a brighter and lighter value. Now, the second thing is that everything works in tandem. Nothing exists in isolation in your painting. So think of it as a symphony, like, this part happens and then you put a line down and then you put a color down and it all works together. The third thing is that a color field is not one color. So just say this red apple over here. Your eye is going to read this as red, but if you look at it closely and isolate the parts of the apple, then you're going to see that there are so many different colors in there. There's orange, and yeah, sure, there's red, but there's also blue, and there's gray, and there's like a little bit of a kind of a really light valued gray white cast. There's yellow, there's black for the outline. I mean, if you get your values right, you can use any color you want. So that's why when I'm doing my 100-day project, and even when I am working in different like say my collages, my mini collages, which I don't know where they are. Okay, here are my mini collages. I set the parameters for this to be like largely neutrals, because what I'm doing is I'm strengthening my values, my knowledge of values and my use of values, because once you get your values correctly, you can use any color you want. And that is true whether you're painting still lifes, portraits, landscapes, whatever. Now, the two concepts that I brought forward when I was doing my still life paintings, which I just want to go over again, is the closer something is to you, the more details it's going to have, and vice versa. So just say this apple over here, it is sitting on the table. It's sitting like the closest to me. It's in the foreground. So I'm going to put the most details on this apple. I'm going to put the most color. I'm going to put the most texture. I'm going to put the most. And then this jar is sitting back. So I hardly did anything to this jar. I basically used the blue that I initially put down on my page. And I just did some very kind of, wash, like just maybe even one wash, a little bit of detail, like I did the bare minimum on this, and that's because I want to push it in the background. The second thing that I talked about in my still lifes is it makes things so much easier when you look at things as shapes. So when you're first painting your still life, this over here is a sphere, and this bowl is a half sphere, and this is a cylinder. So you want to look at things as shapes and build up your shapes. So build up the mass and the value and the weight of it. Don't even think like this is an apple, this is a bowl. And it even works with portraits. So I'm just going to show you this. Now, this is not even done, but I'm doing the same thing. So I put like the shape of the hair, like the hair, I'm not painting like the hair. I'm just putting shapes down. See, for the eyes, I'm just putting shapes down. And it really helps, especially when you're painting, like, say, things that can tend to be a bit intimidating, like, say, a nose or eyes or hair or whatever. If you tend to isolate things and look at them as shapes, because the details will come later. Um, and then the other point I brought up is that you don't have to paint every single detail. You can just suggest things because a mind is going to fill things in. And what I talked about is like my, my fabric that has lines on it. Well, I don't have lines all over. I just have, say, a line over here and it stops right there. And then I have a line over here, but then it stops over here and it stops over here. And, that is the way the eye naturally perceives things anyways, because if this is really bright, it's going to wash out the line anyways. And if this is really dark, like in the shadow, it is going to make the lines not so clear. So the brain is just going to fill things in. And this gives you more of a kind of a painterly kind of a feeling. And you can do this like even in portraits. Like I want my eyes to be prominent, so I'm just going to show you this. So I want my eyes to be prominent, but you don't have to. You can suggest things. Like the mind is really like an amazing thing, if you will. And what comes to mind is that when you take a psychology class, like a basic psychology class, they will put words down, like they will put like an H and then they'll leave the middle part blank and then they'll put a T, and your mind is just gonna fill in the word. Like you're gonna go hat or hut or whatever it is, or hot or whatever, but your mind is really crazy and you will actually think that you saw the full word. It's really bizarre. So yeah, like, you don't have to paint everything in. Now, one of the things I do want to talk about just briefly is the still life. So there's a history of still lifes, and generally, because only wealthy people could afford to have their paintings done, still lifes, even like say during the Renaissance and even further back, they were still for the wealthy. So they painted things like imported foods and silver and gold serving bowls and just all these luxury items. But in the 18th century, there was a painter named Chardin, and I think he's French. And what he did is he painted ordinary kitchen utensils, but he painted them with such tenderness and dignity that it really changed the trajectory of still lifes. And then after Chardin came Van Gogh, and what he did is he took very ordinary items and he imbued them with a sense of reverence. And he also painted psychological portraits, which was so groundbreaking at the time. Like, so what he did is he would paint, say, his chair and his pipe. And then when you looked at it, you would get an idea of who the person who owned these items were. So he was painting like deep psychological portraits that had never been done before. Now, Cézanne, he was painting around the same time as Van Gogh, and he brought a whole new dimension to still lifes. Like he would paint one still life, but there would be multiple perspectives, and that was never done before. And what this would do is it would create subtle distortions in the painting. And he also used color as structure because he would vary the temperature and the value to define the form of something. So these artists really changed the trajectory of still lifes. And I absolutely love doing still lifes. Like what I would recommend is you start off with simple things around your home, like say an apple or a lemon, a bowl, like just things that you are drawn to, and then just, you know, sketch them out and then paint them. And this paper here is not the best paper, honestly, you guys. And I wish that I would have used watercolor paper, or even Bristol paper. But you know, if you paint a still life and hang it up in your kitchen or in your you know, just in your living space, it's just, it brings such a sense of peace and joy to me, you know, when I do that, because it's just like, it's just a reflection of just your everyday items, the things that, you know, the ordinariness of life, and it just brings so much beauty and joy, and peace. So anyways, you guys, I hope that this series has been helpful. I hope you can see how you can apply these lessons to whatever you're painting. And I know the one thing I did talk about is, like, say in a still life, the closer something is to you, the more details you want to put on it. And that does not apply as much when you're doing portraits, because there's not enough space between the eye and the nose, for example, to kind of, you know, apply that same principle. You can apply that principle, but generally when you're doing a portrait, you want the eyes to stand out. But, you know, every other one of the lessons, they apply to anything that you are painting. So I hope that this video has been helpful. I hope it has been inspiring. And if you have any questions or concerns or feedback, I would love to hear what you have to say. So thank you so much, you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.